Hello and welcome to YHTV's nominated show, Magical Medical Tour. This is episode 97. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Christina Suzuma, and with me is our wonderful medical guide, Dr. Glenn Woolman. Hello, Doc.
Hello, Christina. How's your life?
It's absolutely dandy. How's yours?
Absolutely dandy.
I'm very excited about our guest today.
Yeah, I would think you would be. Me too.
Yes.
So let me start by saying greetings, everybody, and welcome to Magical Medical Tour. I'm Dr. Glenn Woolman. I will be your medical guide today, along with Christina, as we travel through another quadrant of the healthcare galaxy in search of optimal health.
Yes, we are doing optimal health today. That's why
Christina,
I have... Yes.
What do we see here?
Oh, I feel like a Muppet right now.
I see
the magical
you
Muppet Show.
Yeah, you obviously listened to the last episode, or was it a future episode or a last episode? I don't even know how to talk about that. When we talk about measles, that's an upcoming episode.
Is it an upcoming? But
well,
yes, I've got my mask on now as we deal with the measles.
And tell me what we're dealing with.
Oh, my son came back with the measles.
So you followed all the advice of Magical Medical Tour?
Yes, and I've got this mask that it's too warm in here, so I have to take it off again. But It's, yes, we definitely did. And so far, so good.
Excellent.
Everything is looking good. And as you said,
work.
the worst thing that could happen was that he would get the measles, and he did.
That's true.
So I would like the grand prize, please.
Yeah. Good. You may get it yet. Your grand prize might be a rash all over your body, accompanied by fever.
Oh, thank you.
My pleasure. Well, today, as Christina said, we're very interested in our next guest. This is Patrick Howell. He's a positive psychology performance coach. He's a master practitioner of NLP, which is Neurolinguistic programming. He's a television host. He's a trainer, a global trainer for the Dale Carnegie organization. He's an author. He's doing a blog, which we may talk about a little later, and so many more things. So at this time, I want to get right into our show on transformation language for optimal health. And I'd like everyone to say hello to Patrick Howell. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, Dr. Woolman. How are you?
I'm good. How come you're not wearing a mask?
I have to go find it. I didn't know everybody was going to walk around with the measles, or else I would have.
Well,
it is on the East Coast, by the way.
Yeah, that's true. It is.
You can get a virus on the computer.
Do not send it to me, please, Christina.
Well, welcome to our show, Patrick. It's so great to have you on board here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's really great to be here.
So if anybody wants to ask Patrick a question or talk to us, do we need to tell them how to do things?
Oh, sure. So if during the show, if you have a question or a comment, you can simply scroll down on your screen and type it into the comment box. And if you're listening to this as podcast, just pick up the phone and call us at 818-LETS-TALK, 818-LETS-TALK, and leave your message, and we will be sure to get it to either Dr. Woolman or to Patrick Howell directly and respond to you. So do leave us your contact information as well. Thank you, Glenn.
You're welcome, Christina. And we do look forward to people commenting. It always gives us great things to think about and sometimes touch on subjects that we hadn't quite prepared for, which is always interesting for us. So we get to learn also. So we like that. Patrick, as the medical guide, I like to give our viewers and listeners a potential path that we're going to take today. So we're going to, at the beginning, find out a little bit about you and what you do and how you got interested in what you do and where you are today. Then we want to start talking about positive psychology and what that means in terms of health for people. And specifically, I know that you focus a lot on language. And so I want to talk about language and how language itself can help us in our health. And then we'll go from there. We'll see where we're going. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's a great plan. I look forward to it. Just one point of clarity, and I just want to make sure I'm clear with this. I'm a former Dale Carnegie trainer, and I just want that so they don't come after me and say, "Hey, I'm claiming to be a trainer." Still, I'm a former trainer for the Dale Carnegie organization. Spent about 6 years as a global trainer for that organization, as well as a director of corporate initiatives inside of their group. So I just want to throw that clarity out there. But wherever we go with this is great with me. Language is really an important part of existence. So
thank you for clearing that up. We don't want anybody to have misrepresentation here. So let's talk about you. You are a positive psychology coach.
That's correct. Yes.
What does that mean?
What it really means is that I pull in the tenets or the interventions from applied positive psychology to help my clients achieve the things that are really important to them. And so an applied positive psychology coach is really a coach. Oftentimes when we look at the coaching field, it can get very muddy because there are coaches really just in about any genre. There's executive coaches, life coaches, management coaches, applied positive psychology coaches. And so in the case of being a positive psychology performance coach, what it really means is that I pull from the information and the academic research in the field of positive psychology to help my clients grow.
How did you get interested in that?
Oh, geez, it's really a long haul that tied together for me. Many years ago, Glenn, I had started a small coaching practice, really just kind of dabbling in. I was working as a fundraiser for an organization in a fundraising company, and this was around when I was about 30 years old, and I happened to pick up a book. Forgive me, I don't recall the title of the book, but it was by a fellow, Og Mandino. And his book really it started my transformation in life. And it's a book that's prescribed to read over the course of a year. So you read the same passages over and over again throughout an entire year. And it's something that really made an impact on me, and it started to shift who I was being in the world and shift my relationship with myself and then with the people around me. Then from there, I wound up becoming a president of a local Toastmasters group, which is a public speaking and leadership group, and wound up picking up a whole lot of clients for my coaching practice. Then I was recruited into the Dale Carnegie organization, spent quite a few years there. And it really was kind of an organic process for me. It just I became interested in the science behind optimal human performance. I had been in the personal effectiveness field for quite some time, but I was always one of those people who said, well, I wanted to, as a participant in the classroom, I'm always saying in my own mind, well, who says so besides you? What's the evidence? And so I really started to delve into some of the evidence which makes people really live an optimal existence.
Tell us a little bit about some of that evidence. What do you see as evidence?
There's so much. I mean, I really don't know where to start, but I can tell you that the science of positive psychology, which is a science, was coined anyhow by Dr. Marty Seligman during his time with the American Psychological Association. He was the president of that association at one point. And what he had recognized was that traditional psychology focused on fixing ailments, right? Working with people to help them get from, if we look at a baseline being 0, traditional psychology worked with people who are -1, -2, -3, and the entire aim was to pull them back up to baseline so that they were functioning in society, that they can contribute. What Marty Seligman realized was that there was really not much out there for people who were already doing really well. And people who were at baseline or above and then wanted to get to +1, +2, +3. So he coined the term of positive psychology. And since then, there's been a ton of research, on interventions that people can do to live a more full and satisfying life. We can talk about some of those if you like, but that's really the genesis of positive psychology.
Yeah, I would like to talk about some of that, for example? Give us an example of that.
Well, actually, one of his, I guess, hallmark research studies, or I know it's attributed to him, is something that he calls 3 good things. And the exercise of 3 good things, which has been well researched by him, as well as now, I think Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky is someone else who's really looked into this work, is all around generating a sense of gratitude. But not just a sense of, feel-good gratitude, but really looking at, well, what does gratitude do for us? And the 3 good things exercise is very simple. And actually, it's something that I do. And I certainly recommend that people can use this, is that every evening before you go to bed, pull out a journal, pull out a piece of scrap paper. It doesn't matter, just anywhere, and jot down 3 good things that happened during the day. And it's really amazing what happens with that when we start to do that. Because if we make it an assignment, and that's where the applied piece comes. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I work with applied positive psychology, meaning that I'm really interested in, how this stuff impacts people immediately, how it shows up in their world. And if we take things like this 3 good things intervention and we make it an assignment over a month's period of time, then what happens is, and I've seen this working with clients literally all around the world, is if they take it as an assignment, then they go throughout their day, and like everybody else, they have sometimes crappy days. But if they know at the end of the day when they're laying down to bed that they have to write down 3 good things, automatically throughout the day, the shift happens. They start to look for positive things because they have an assignment to take on. And so it really does, the research says it starts to help lift our optimism, our confidence, our sense of life satisfaction for up to 6 months just by doing this intervention for 1 week. So it's really pretty amazing.
That is kind of amazing. I like the concept of doing that. When we interviewed Marissa Pay in one of our previous episodes, she talked about doing something in the morning before you get out of bed, listing a number of things that are good or that you want. So how do you feel about that combination, doing something at night and in the morning?
Yes, I personally, I think it's fine to do it at any time during the day. The original research that I'm familiar with was with Dr. Seligman talking about doing it, before we go to bed. I personally don't do it before I go to bed all the time because I find that, I have 2 young boys and I have a company to run. So by the time I get, 8:30 at night, I'm exhausted half the time. So I oftentimes will just write it down during the day. And sometimes for me, honestly, it's not even in a compiled place. There might be just little pieces of scratch paper all around. But I know if I'm going to write it down, it keeps me focused on it. And it deals with that sort of selective attention, right? We only have a certain amount of attention span during the day. And if I'm focused on, okay, where are the good things? Where are the positive things? Then they start to show up for me. They start to be there, not in some mystical, sense, but in the sense of that they were probably always there. I just didn't see them before. And so I think it's fine probably to do it anytime during the day.
Another interesting question. I guess I'm telling you that I have an interesting question.
Let me be the judge of that.
We may have to speak about my transformational language. Another brilliant question that I'm about to ask you that I don't think anyone else could think about. What about, you mentioned your children. Do you have them do anything like that?
Love it. And I have a brilliant answer for you. My 4-year-old, I have a 4-year-old, his full name is Patrick Knight, but we call him Knight. And I have a 9-year-old, Nathan. And Knight in particular, just about every day, he goes to a local daycare. And just about every day he comes home or I pick him up from school, the first thing that he says to me, he says, "Daddy, I did 3 good things today." So he starts off like that and he's 4 years old. My 9-year-old is right. He's 9 years old and he's a boy. When I get him talking about it, he'll always come up with some. But he knows that Dad's always going to ask, what are 3 good things that happened during the day? Because I really feel that research or not, right? Just that practice of looking for the good things in life, and looking to generate, our good fortune by noticing that it's already there, it just it's had a big impact on who I am as a person, and I want it to have a big impact on who my children are.
It's great.
Yeah, yes, I agree. And I agree. Your answer was much more brilliant than the question. Thank you for that. I want to start talking about how this all relates to health, because this is Magical Medical Tour, and we want to talk about positive psychology. And of course, performance is important. How do you see that what you do can help people in optimal health, achieving optimal health?
Oh, in a whole lot of ways. And I mean, the entire mind-body connection, right, is so important. So optimal health is not just about, being physically fit, although that's a huge component, right, in keeping our bodies as fit as we possibly can. It's also about, having optimal health in our intellect. It's also about having optimal health in our spirit, if that's something that you believe in, or our soul, or our religious beliefs, if that's what people choose to believe in. Optimal health is such a big concept. It's not a tiny little one little area. It encompasses everything. And applied positive psychology and the use of language, transformative language, in either from applied positive psychology directly or just in the field of personal effectiveness, certainly lends greatly to a feeling, an overall sense of confidence, an overall sense of well-being. And I just to give you an example, I work with a lot of clients, and a big part of my practice is helping people to generate a sense of self-confidence in their life. And there's a long history of why I'm really interested in that, and part of it came from being on the other side of the coin, having a lack of confidence up until I was around 30. So I have a real heartfelt thing for this. And, when I work with people that are, in the area of confidence, what I find is that that whole piece lends to, when people can get a greater sense of confidence and optimism, they just feel better about themselves. And if you feel better about yourself, I'd submit that that's probably better health right then and there, because it's not just about the physical piece.
I would agree with that. One of the things that I look at with my clients as a medical guide is, and those people that have followed our show before, I have 6 categories that I work with people to achieve optimal health: nutrition, exercise, stress management, sleep management, spirituality, and patterns of behavior. And patterns of behavior, I think, is the area where we are in common right now in terms of all of the other aspects. If somebody is not doing the right thing nutritionally, or not something that they could improve on in exercise, we look at patterns of behavior. And one of the challenges for me always is to help people change patterns of behavior. So how do you approach people and their patterns of behavior? Because I would assume that when you see people, it's a lot of patterns of behavior that are bringing them to places that they don't want to be anymore, and then they come to you. So how do you work with people to recognize a pattern and then change a pattern for the better?
Sure, in a few different ways, and one of the ways that and really the title of this show is around working with their language. I'm a huge proponent of generating for ourselves language that's empowering, and language that helps us to achieve the things that we want to achieve. A lot of my work and my study and my practice actually is looking at the connection between our language, right? And when I say language, I don't necessarily always mean what we're saying to the outside world, although that can play a really big part. Oftentimes it's that internal dialogue, that nonsense, that stuff that's going on inside the head, that we might say to ourselves one time or 1,000 times over, but that really creates self-limiting beliefs, or self-limiting, a self-limiting dialogue. So I'll oftentimes work with clients, and actually, I say for the most part, one of the first things I'll ask people is a question, simply something like this. I'll say to a new client, I'll ask them a question: around when things don't go right during the day. What do you say to yourself? And what I have found and what I've experienced in my own life, I mean, not even just 17 years ago when I started in this, I'm talking about even now I have to keep my own language in check, is that it's really pervasive when things don't go right. On average, the majority of people that I've worked with and I've talked to and personally is that oftentimes if we don't keep it in check, there's a negative thought that comes in mind. I picked up a new client recently, and the first thing I asked her is, what do you think about what comes to mind when things don't go right? And right out of her mouth, immediately she said loser. Now, that's disempowering language. So I'll work with clients to number one, see what their internal language is, and then to slowly begin to shift it.
We all are listening to ourselves, but sometimes it's in such a state of awareness that we're not even aware that we're listening to ourselves. So how do we first do that?
You're right, though.
What's that?
That's pretty deep.
I have a very deep question for you.
You are brilliant, so.
Oh, stop it. Christina, why are you laughing?
I got myself
because I'm bouncing already.
I think the question was asked, but I apologize with all this. I think I lost the question.
Christina, do you remember it? I want to see if you're listening.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
I'll ask it again. I don't want to put her on the spot, especially if she's bouncing. She could fly right off that ball, and who knows what would happen. So basically, we're talking about two types of language. One is our internal language, and one is the external language that we use with other people. And I want to get into that near the end of the show. But the first part I think is very important, is the internal language that we're speaking to ourselves, that we hear in our mind. But because it's in our mind and because it's so pervasive and it's always there, sometimes we may not even recognize that that's coming from us and that it has an influence on us. How do we tune into that and recognize that influence?
Yes, and that's really a big piece around gaining that self-awareness piece of, okay, what's really happening? Very simply, I mean, there are a couple things that folks can actually take on and do, and that probably the easiest is to carry a little notebook with them. And during the day, when things inevitably go crappy, right? We all have I mean, even the best of days oftentimes have little areas that are darker. And in those moments is to just listen to yourself, is to become mindful of what is the dialogue that's happening. And sometimes what we'll find is that the dialogue is right about ourselves. I mean, like we're saying something negative about ourselves. I'm a loser. I'm no good, or I'll never have the things that I want to achieve. Sometimes what we find is that the dialogue is about other people. Oh, that jerk who cut me off in the road. What's wrong with that person? What's wrong with this person? And all of those kind of things create a dialogue that's internal to ourselves that I have seen, if we don't keep it in check, steers us in the wrong direction. And again, no one is perfect in this. My own self. I went through this exercise last week, because I was just double checking myself to see where things are for sort of setting my North Star, if you would. And I was asking myself, well, okay, what's my internal dialogue? And I noticed just that. I live in New Jersey, and in New Jersey, there's a lot of traffic, and people cut you off all the time, and they're not usually that friendly about it. And I found, and I love New Jersey people. Don't get me wrong. I'm born and bred here, and I love the state. The fact of the matter is, what I found is that I had this negative dialogue that wasn't in check. Like, what's wrong with these people, or what's wrong with this person? And so it really, and I started to write it down, and just so I can become aware of it. So if I don't see it, right, if I don't know that it's there, then we can't do anything about it. The analogy I always use is, I mentioned 17 years ago, I was the president of a Toastmasters club. Again, in Toastmasters, it's a nonprofit group, and people come there to learn to speak in public and develop leadership skills, which is exactly why I was there. I became the president after a while. In my club, we had something called an jar. And an jar is just that. It's a jar like this, and like an empty jar, and on the outside of the jar, it says And in the classroom, as you're standing up to speak, there is someone in the back of the room counting your ums. And I'll tell you this much: the first time I got up in front of the group for a 2-minute talk, I had so many ums because we had to put a nickel in for each and I think I owed $3.75 over 2 minutes. Now, if someone wasn't there counting it or bringing it forth to me, showing me what it was, I would have never known. So it's the same concept: taking a notebook, jotting it down, so then it's there for us. We can see it, and then we just choose. It becomes a choice. Do I want to work on this or don't I? And that's a really empowering place to be, is to be in the place of choice as opposed to the place of a blind spot.
I would think that they would make a lot more money if they had a based on listening to everyone say how they really everything that they talk about each day.
Or
a like jar would make a lot of money.
Yeah.
I want to know, so after you find out that you have this negative dialogue, what's your next step?
It really depends on the client. So there's not one particular step I'll use in every case. But to give an example, I think one of the biggest pieces is gaining that self-awareness, is pulling things. And in adult learning, we know this. We know that that we call them blind spots. Is that it's like a blind spot in the in the car, in the side view mirror of the car. Mm-hmm. If we don't see what's there, then we can easily have a car crash. So the very first piece is just pulling it up into awareness, and people alone. I mean, just alone, the power and the impact and the command we can gain of ourselves just by knowing that we have it. Because, like you said, oftentimes we're in our own heads and we don't even know it's there. When we know it's there, there's something magical that can happen, just in that stance alone. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll move to helping people recognize that if it's a self-limiting thought or belief, if it's a self-limiting dialogue, like I'm no good, right? That seems to be something that's pervasive in really across the board. I did some calculations a few weeks ago, and I currently have clients in around 20 different countries around the world. And out of those clients in all these places, I can tell you that everybody has these things. Either I'm not good enough or I'll never be good enough. But what I do when people have that sort of sense is I want them to recognize and to look at it objectively, and to understand that there is no objective truth in a statement like, I'm not good enough. And what do I mean by that? I simply mean that there is no I'm not good enough out there in the universe. It's made up in language. For example, you couldn't mail me a quarter pound of I'm not good enough, right? Because really it's just something that's accepted of ourselves along the path. And this is where therapists come in. They help people to discover, where along the path that this happened. What I'm interested in is the forward application, the solution of things. So what I want folks to realize is, okay, it doesn't really exist. It's a made up phenomenon. I'm not good enough. And if it's made up, and we can really, objectively accept that somewhere along the line, I became the judge, the jury, and the warden, of my own self. I accept that I'm not good enough, and I lock the bars behind me. Then we can then start to shift and start creating new language that's powerful, that's empowering, that's transformative, that then has an uplifting effect on us. So those are really the first two phases. Actually, three is to recognize it, then to objectively look at it and know it's not real, it's just something we accepted about ourselves along the way. And then the third piece would be to then start creating and crafting new empowering language.
Excellent. One of the things that I always work on with people is, especially if we're talking about patterns of behavior, is to recognize it and then see that there are choices and then make a choice and apply it. But then one of the things that's very important, I think, is to continuously go back and make sure you didn't go to back to an old pattern again. So I think after you make those changes, it's good to make sure that you don't revert back to your old pattern. I do want to ask you a question about internal dialogue also. do you think that people that don't have an internal dialogue should begin to think about having one and try and create one?
I think it can't hurt. Yeah, I think it can't hurt. To be quite honest, I'm not sure I've I mean, just in the line of my work, the nature is that people come to me probably with, some internal dialogue. So I'm not sure that I recall working with someone who hasn't had that. But if we don't, then I say sure, because it's very closely related to the area, and the research behind priming our environments. And priming, right, is the concept of creating a stimulus around us that then that impacts other stimulus or other behaviors. Meaning, for example, like if we want to create an environment that's, for some folks, that's relaxing, that's nice, that's calm, we might put flowers around the room, right? We might hang calm pictures. And we all know that intuitively, right? It's a pretty common thing. My mother likes to, have flowers out on her table, even if she doesn't have guests coming over, because it primes her environment. And I would suggest that priming ourselves with positive, positive is also a tricky word, but with empowering language that's guiding us in the direction that we want to go. I would suggest that also helps us to stay on track and to achieve the things that we want to achieve. When I was 24 years old, the very first, quote unquote vision board that I put together, meaning a vision board, meaning a collection of visual pictures of the things that I wanted to achieve. And I had three things on that vision board. I had a picture of a house, I had a picture of a piano, and I had a picture of a cruise ship. And I'm not a great artist, so it had nothing to do with the art. But I put this in front of me all day, at my job. And within 2 years, I had purchased a house with my brother. Almost serendipitously, my father called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to go on a cruise together?" And I wound up buying an electric piano. Why? Not because anything mystical. Again, it's because I primed my environment. It was always there for me. So the internal dialogue became around wanting to achieve those things, wanting to make them happen. So I would say, yeah, the long answer to your very short question is yes. I think it's probably a good thing.
That's so interesting to hear you speak about this, Patrick, because though I haven't taken the courses that you have, I've studied a lot with indigenous cultures and their elders, and they have always been very, very, they enforce language. They enforce the power of language. It's like, for them, like if you go to Hawaii, the way they pass down their history is called talk story, and everything is through language and dance, of course, and the arts. And they've always, when I first began to study with them, it was always watch the language, listen to your language, listen to what you're saying, listen to what others are saying, and begin the shift. And it was such a beautiful, fluid motion that it. Because we are, well, of course, those of us who were there learning, we were there to learn. So we came in with as much of an open mind as we could. Now, when you are working with clients, Patrick, and you are taking them through these steps, do you find that there is a lot of defensiveness that comes up when you're working with them? Because I've encountered that with people as well. Do you find that with your work?
I don't, and the reason I think I don't is because I set up the coaching in that way. So, in other words, in order to take on the client, I truly believe that there has to be a good fit between the client or the coachee and the coach. So there has to be a rapport, and there has to be an understanding that, hey, heck, I'm going to give 110% of what I have. Meaning that as the coach, I'm going to come in and be in an organization or with individuals, and I'm going to give 100. If there is 110% out there somewhere, then I'm going to give 110%. And in order to work with a client, then they have to be willing to do the same thing and to really take on stuff and to be open, because that sense or that openness, or having what Dr. Carol Dweck would call a growth mindset, as opposed to a fixed mindset, is one of the platforms, I think, for growth in general. So that's probably why I don't. I can see if I didn't set prime my coaching right up front to expect that and set expectations, how people could somewhat get defensive, but not in my case. I don't think as much.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's not always easy looking within. And listening to oneself.
It's not always fun looking within. I can tell you that from personal
yes.
experience. Yeah, it's no joyride.
And what a continuous journey, right?
If it ever ends and someone ever can figure out the secret pill that it can end and you can be successful, great. Pass it along and let everybody else know about it. If not, then we live a human existence, right? We give ourselves permission to be human, as Dr. Tal Ben Shahar would say, one of my mentors, and we accept the fact that we just have to, we have to deal with being human and constantly work towards achieving our ideal self.
That's fantastic. We'll have to decide whether or not I'm human now.
And I have to tell you guys, in just a moment, you might see me doing a lot of this, and it won't be because of anything, wild or crazy. But of course, the springtime is here, and the very first bee that I have flying around my room is about yo big.
Oh my God.
So, he's over there by the window now, but I'm keeping the corner of my eye on him if he comes. So I just figured I'd let you, in case you see me do it.
Patrick, would you say that if a statement is made, it's not easy to look in? If you heard one of your clients say that, would you want to agree with that, or would you want to change that?
That it's not easy, like the statement itself, it's not easy to look in?
Yeah, it's not easy to look in to yourself and to listen to your own dialogue. Is that part of what you would consider that would be something that, just like I'm a loser, would that be something that you would want to address, or would you just say, no, it's true, it's not easy to look in?
No, in the long haul, I probably would want to address that. I probably would want to address, even for myself, address the fact that, it's not easy is really, again, just made up language, because it's just a matter of existence. It's a matter of existence, looking in. We all look in to some degree, right? There's probably not a person in the world who doesn't look into, I don't know about sociopaths, but I think, if you're not a sociopath and you're not dead, then you probably look into some degree. So yeah, probably in the long run, I'd want to, shift some of that language too, and just have it be part of the general way of living.
Before we go to, thank you for that. Before we go to external language where we're actually speaking to other people, I want to ask, why would someone go to a positive psychology coach versus a psychologist or a psychiatrist if they have issues? What's the differentiation? If I'm sitting at home saying, well, I'm not making enough money, or I don't get enough business, or my artwork isn't doing well, or my piano I'm not playing well, something is going on. When does someone choose to go to a coach versus an actual psychologist?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that question, because I think that really is a very important question. And whether
I was going to say that.
It is. It really is. And in this field, it's a very important question too, in the field of coaching in general, in the sense that I'm not 100% sure that there always is a choice between the two. They're two completely different disciplines. They're two completely different fields. So oftentimes what I recommend clients is that if they have things that they want to deal with in the past and they're looking for a therapeutic approach, then they probably should engage with a therapist and also with a coach. It doesn't hurt to do both. Coaches typically, at least from my experience in my type of coaching, are forward-looking, meaning that there's no, of course, we'll touch on some of the stuff in the past, but my least concern is why people think the way they do, and more how can we shift the way that they're behaving or being or thinking now, so that today, tomorrow, the next day, that they're having different results in their world. Where a traditional therapy, looks at, okay, well, let's cure the problem from what happened in childhood, what happened along the way, and they're both, in my sense, equally important. But they are two totally different, different disciplines.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I want to now move toward going from the internal language that we're speaking to the external language, the one that we speak to other people, the one that other people hear from us. What are your first thoughts on that before we get deeply into that?
My first thoughts on the language that we give to other people immediately comes really to two areas. And one of the first areas is our body language, because that's a part of language. And as we talk, I can explain why I believe that's really important as well. And then also our tonality, how we're saying things, what kind of inflection we're using in our voice. And there's research in this area as well, because we recognize that our body language, our how we're speaking, the way we're saying things, has an impact not only on the other person, but it also has a great impact on us and how we're feeling about ourselves. So I think those two areas, really, body language as well as voice tone, intonation, and all of these things that are really important, that add fabric to a conversation or to an outside dialogue, add fabric to the listener, but it also adds something granular and something really important to us internally.
I wasn't sure when you said to us, you used the word us. Were you talking about positive psychology coaches, or were you talking about just people listening to other people?
Probably people listening to other people, yeah. It's
okay.
more really to everyone. It's just, when we're able to do that, it adds a greater level of competence for ourselves when we're able to really express ourselves from body language standpoint, and as well as voice tone and what have you.
So you said two things, and I'm assuming that there are three things. One is the body language, two is the tone, and three is the actual words themselves.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. And the words are very important too. The words are, I usually refer to that as the ticket to get in the ball game, right? We have to have the right words. It depends on the situation. If we're in business, we have to have the right words, and the knowledge and the expertise. In personal relationships, we have to use the right kind of words. And I know we're going to go here, so I'll give an example of what I mean by the right words. And forgive me, researcher, who I'm going to be quoting. I can't recall, but exactly who it is, but it'll come to me. And her work was all around Shelley Taylor. That's it, Dr. Shelley Taylor from the University of, I think, California. And her work was around active constructive responding, and using active constructive responses with others to generate, positive relationships. Meaning an active constructive response is simply being engaged in someone else's good news and helping them to savor their own good news. Wow, Glenn, you've been doing this show for 96 episodes or what have you. That's great news, right? How did you come to being part of this show? How did it turn out for you? Tell me more. Mm-hmm. And those active constructive responses are, from what her research shows, are really what help create solid, lasting relationships, where we all think of, right, having the shoulder to cry on, which is very important, having the shoulder to cry on. But what her research says is actually the positive responses, the active constructive responses to good news, is really what bonds relationships together.
That's a great segue for now, because I want to move into language between people, and usually that's what language is, other than the internal language. So in relationships, how should a couple, let's say a married couple, how should they develop a language which includes body language, tone, and the verbiage, and also the response? What's the best way to go about doing that for a couple?
practice, practice, practice. The only reason I say that is because when my wife watches this, that's what she's going to she's going to say, you should have said. Yeah, she's going to say, practice, practice, practice. I think, again, it's one of the first steps is recognizing it again, pulling it up out of a blind spot that, okay, if there are communication challenges, recognizing that they're communication challenges. The second piece is, again, to just accept the fact that we are human and not to beat ourselves up about it, but then to really get to work on setting strategies for communication with each other. One of the things that I find important is having something that I refer to as like bright lines, meaning that just bright lines in communication that either things that you don't cross over. Right, it's a bright line in the road. You just don't cross over it. Or when you see that bright line, you have a strategy, a plan B. Right, you're approaching the bright line in a communication with a loved one or a significant other, and you're almost there, but that's a bright line that not to go towards. To have a plan B, a strategy, an exit strategy. Be it, go down to the basement, like in my place, and hit the heavy bag, right, or call a friend. Take a walk around the block. Any of these things that keep us from crossing that bright line.
It seems like saying I'm sorry is very difficult for a lot of people. What kind of advice do you have, or how would you coach someone to be able to say I'm sorry?
Again, I think it's really it's going to be dependent on the person and why they're having a tough time or a challenge saying they're sorry. Oftentimes, what I find is that the saying I'm sorry or the saying I apologize is not as difficult for folks as it is to recognize why they're really apologizing. So if they have their why, if they have a real reason to apologize, and they can and it resonates with who they are, meaning that, geez, I'm really sorry, or I do apologize. Then just having people attached to that why, that bigger picture of why they apologize, can make a big difference in actually saying the words, and it becomes a lot easier. So I think really just helping people connect to the real reason that they're apologizing.
And how about the person who's receiving the apology? What should that response be? And talking about and relating to what you spoke of just a few moments ago.
Yeah. I would say that the best response is to look someone in the eyes and just simply say thank you. Thank you for that. And then it comes the process of looking at where you are as the receiver of the apology and determining, do you really accept the apology? And if you accept it, saying thank you and moving on. And if you don't, then don't say that you do, right? Don't say that you do. It has to be something that, that has to be worked through, whether it's in, intimate relationship or just a friend, a friendship or a casual relationship. Not saying that we do when we don't. And when we do, just accept it and then say thank you, a smile, and go in another direction.
So what I'm hearing, Patrick, is about authenticity and honesty.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a lot about pulling back the curtain on ourselves and working to become as authentic as we possibly can. And I say that with emphasis because I think it's important. Because this word authenticity is out there now. I mean, we have Dr. Kristen Neff. We have all these people doing this research on authenticity, and quite a few people that are touching in this field. And what I find is that for some people, when they're familiar with it, then authenticity can become a challenge. Like, oh, geez, I'm not authentic enough. And I'm not so sure I agree with that. I think authenticity is individual for the person, and we keep on finding it in our core. We pull back some layers, peel an onion, peel the onion, and we start to show it. And then sometimes it gets masked, right? Sometimes we're not authentic. Okay. Then we can get back to our roots as long as we're being self-aware.
Very powerful.
I think there are a few other areas that are sometimes difficult in language. And I know that working in the emergency department and working in medicine, every once in a while, I had to come out of the trauma room and go to a set of parents and, for example, say to them that their 8-year-old daughter just died. Do you have any thoughts on how to give news like that to people, either from a physician's point of view? You know, you can help the physicians that are watching this show might have that issue, but from a physician's point of view, how would you say something? Or from someone else's point of view, when someone has to tell someone else bad news about, say, a death in the family?
That's a tough one, Dr. Woman. And
I'm not going to ask you easy ones, Patrick.
Yeah, I know. It's some easy stuff.
He's trying to get me to bounce, Patrick.
He's going to get me to bounce in a moment. Right. That's a tough one. I don't know if I would give it necessarily advice. My advice would come less as a coach and more as a human being, I think, and probably guidance that just about anybody would say is to try to be as empathetic, obviously, and authentic with giving that news to somebody else. But that's probably less as a coach and really just more as a human being and putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, because. Yeah, but I think that's probably my answer on that one.
Okay, how about staying in that category? Somebody, a loved one just died in their family, and you're calling them to say something to them. What's an approach that you would suggest?
So you're calling someone else who another family member? Is that the case?
No, well, not necessarily, but it could be. Let's say someone in your family just died. Okay. And I know you and I'm friends with you and I want to call you up and relate my condolences. Is there a good way to say something like that?
Yes, and back to Christina's word, authentically. Simply authentically. In language like that, my stance on it is if we're authentic and if we're genuine and if it's coming from a place of empathy, then we really can't say it in a wrong way. It can't come out in a wrong way. It's if it's coming from an authentic place, then the words then become less significant. The words are less significant. Just the fact that they've called and their heart was in it is probably substantial enough for most people.
How do you tell somebody they're wrong?
You're wrong. No, I
lift up a mirror. Can you repeat that to the mirror, please?
Yeah, I think oftentimes telling people that they're wrong, and again, it's case specific. So in the a medical operating room where you spend some of your time, I'm sure, and the doctor's office, people come in with claims, and you can look at them scientifically and say, hey, that's wrong or you're wrong. But a lot of the rest of the world and the rest of our existence is, much more gray than that. So when situations are gray and we, expect that somebody else is wrong, either in their factual data or in their outlook, sometimes the indirect approach to telling people that they're wrong can be the most profound approach, because if I were to look at you in, across the table in a business meeting or in, just in an interaction and say, hey, Dr. Woman, you're wrong. You're just wrong. Then the visceral response on your end would be to, hey, put the dukes up. Who is this person to tell me that I'm wrong? If we can, approach, people somewhat in somewhat of an indirect way, especially when the territory is gray, when there is no factual standing in things, and it's not life or death, then we can lower that guard, lower that visceral response, and people will then allow us in more. They'll allow us in, and then we can influence them in certain different ways. We can influence them through a demonstration of why we believe that our stance is right, or examples, or facts, or statistics. But there's an old saying, and it really does resonate with me, and it goes that a person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. So looking to really, convince somebody of your side by telling them they're wrong, they're going to be of the same opinion anyhow because their fists are up. So approach it sometimes indirectly in a more gentle approach.
How about reversing that situation? And my question here is, if you're being told you're wrong, part of my question is also, when you hear that, you have that visceral response. So there's an internal dialogue that goes on in your mind. Should there be a delay phase that people should be aware of between their internal dialogue and what they're about to say to someone? And that could be not only if you're told something is wrong, but if you're having a discussion, say with a loved one or with a friend, and getting into maybe an argument. Should there be some kind of a delay between what you want to say and what you're about to say?
Yes, and I would refer to those delays as cushions. So they cushion our response, and the delay could be a pause. It could be a pause in time. It could be just a few seconds. It could be a few minutes. It could be an hour. Right? Whatever. There's no specific rule to it. The delay also, or that cushion, could also be a cushioning response, meaning that oftentimes, right, when we think someone's wrong, I can say to you, "Well, I hear what you're saying, but." Right? I hear what you're saying, but here's my point of the view, or I hear what you're saying, however. And that but or that however really kind of squashes or negates the fact that you just said I hear what you're saying.
Right.
It's really saying, okay, I didn't hear what you're saying, or I don't agree with you. So oftentimes just a cushion can simply be, I understand your point of view, and have you thought about it from this standpoint? That's much gentler, right? That's a much gentler approach than saying, I can understand your point of view, but. Because when I say but, it means I really didn't understand your point of view. If I say, I understand your point of view, and, right? And have you looked at it from this standpoint? People become more open. I mean, it's a matter of using language to create behaviors in ourselves and others, and certain language certainly does that.
Patrick, we're in a modern society now where everybody's on computers and emailing and texting and instant messaging. Is there any kind of advice you have for people in terms of language, since it's going to be written and there'll be no body language? Maybe you can capitalize or you can make those little emoticon faces. But any thoughts on how people should be dialoguing through the internet or texting or something like that?
It's called don't.
Well,
that's
Christina,
my way of doing it.
I'm not going to sound like an old fogey here, so I'm not going to be the person who says, put away the text, because I'm guilty of it. I have a smartphone, an iPad, and 2 laptops. But my greatest wisdom really will come from, I think, Judge Judy on this one. Judge Judy said, say it, forget it, write it, regret it.
Yes.
So,
nice.
no, I do think that we can, right, as a society and as human beings, get so caught up in just sending texts, and we all, misinterpret texts and misinterpret the emails.
Yes.
Email is not necessarily, and I'll give a shout out to a retired GS-15 from the naval base here locally, who I've worked with for years. Her name is Mary, and she had a huge team, ran the whole logistics department, hundreds of people for the Navy here. And she used to say that email, and this was before text was very big, but email is not for communication; it's for information. And using that kind of logic, that it's for information. If we really want to communicate something, get the information out, and then pick up the phone or stop over and see somebody if you can, and have a communication about that.
Do you think that our texting and all of the emails are having any influence on the way we then speak to people now in person?
Probably.
Oh yes, I believe that there is, Glenn, because it's like when you read something, it's perspective, right?
Right.
So if you're in a not such a good mood today, or things have been happening and you're caught up in a whirlwind, and you read in an email, there could be a sensitive email about a topic. You're going to read it with that connotation.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen it over and over and over again. Of course, from the acting community, that's exactly what we do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We read a script and we break it down for ourselves and our take on what is being written. Well, that's happening in daily life right now. And I have seen so many situations that that arise, and people have no idea. Well, that's not what I meant.
Right.
You're going, well, I think you better pick up the phone or just drop by.
Well, I did not know until recently that I guess the younger kids, like the 14 and 15, we have younger neighbors, and good friends with our kids. But the girl is I think 14 or 15 years old, and kids at that age nowadays, they date completely via text. Right?
Wow.
But that's safe.
They've never met each other. It's definitely safe, right? But bizarre, I think. So yeah, it has to have an impact on. It'll be very interesting to see, I think, in the future, and to when this is more researched, and I'm sure there's research out there now. I'm not that familiar with it, but of how it really does impact, because dating via text is a little bizarre for someone in my age group.
We're speaking with Patrick Howell, a positive psychology performance coach, an author, a TV host, and a new and upcoming blogger. And Patrick, we always ask our guests for a health tip on Magical Medical Tour. Do you have something for us?
I'll give you two of them, okay?
A bonus.
All right, I'm going to give you two. For me, and something that's worked for me and worked for clients that I've dealt with, is creating rituals for health. Actually, specific physical rituals that can help us be more healthy. This is the first one, and I'll give you an example of what I mean. I'm busy, and I have a business to run, so I know that I don't always get out to the gym like I'd like to. But what I do is for myself is I keep a pull-up bar in my office, and I keep a pull-up bar at home. And something simple as a pull-up bar, because it creates a ritual for me. Every time I walk through that certain doorway, I jump up and I do, 5 to 10 pull-ups.
That's great.
Yeah, it's again priming the environment, and then I have push-up bars that I use, and I keep them around certain places as well, because it helps me physically. But the physical aspect for me is less. I'm in pretty good health as it is. What it really does for me is when I'm keeping my body physically fit, it keeps my mind physically fit, and my spirit, and and my energy and my vigor. So that'd be the first one. Create a ritual that works for you, something easy that you really can't skip by. And the second piece would be the second tip I'd have is to practice being fortunate. And what do I mean by that? I literally mean practice being fortunate. Practice looking at the things that you're fortunate for. Because when we really look for the things that we're fortunate for, and then we verbalize it, we tell people what we're fortunate for, we tell others, that adds a whole nother area of life. I mean, I don't know where I'd be without the practice of being fortunate, because I haven't always felt fortunate in my life. And, last week I'm laying, next to my son. I was actually laying next to both of them. And I just rolled over and said, boys, I'm just so fortunate to have you guys in my life. And, my 9-year-old son, he just rolls over, and he's tired, so he's vulnerable as it is.
Good timing, Dad.
Right, great timing. When they're vulnerable, they're even extra cute, right? He just in his tired little groggy voice says, "Daddy, I'm so fortunate to have you, Mommy, and brother. I don't know what I'd do without you guys." And he's 9 years old.
Nice.
And then my baby says, I love you guys so much too. So it was a big love fest. But practice being fortunate. Really look for the things you're fortunate and tell other people that you're fortunate.
Those are beautiful. And I think they'll make our 2014 compilation of health tips. Patrick, before we go, thank you for those. They're really great.
Yes.
and seems like easy to do.
Yes.
And I'm happy that you didn't at the end of it say, but.
Or
Patrick,
either of us say but.
You're gonna notice your butt a whole lot more now.
Excellent. That'll be internal and external, hopefully. Now, Patrick, in preparing for this show, I want to know if there's anything that you felt that you wanted to say that we didn't get to. This is a quick opportunity before we close.
I think really the main thing I'd want to say, to folks is that recognize that our language does have an impact. Our words can, in some ways, create our world. And when we change our words, we can change our world around us. And as a matter of fact, I think that's the title of a book by Dr. Adams or so. Change your words, change your world, I think is the title. And I really do believe it's true. We can start shifting who we're being and, live a more fulfilled, satisfied life. And then also tell people that I started this new blog and it is a magneticu.com. Don't expect a lot yet because it's brand new. But if you get on the site and start contributing, it'll be a contributor's blog. Then we'll get a lot there together. That's about it. Sorry for the shameless plug.
Transformational language for optimal health. I'm grateful to our very special guest, Patrick Howell, for sharing his expertise and wisdom with us. I would like to thank all of my teachers and my healers for allowing me to be in the place that I am today. I want to thank Christina, YogaHub, and Segovia for all the work that they're doing on Magical Medical Tour and with many of the other programs that are going to be coming out pretty soon. I look forward to getting together next week on Magical Medical Tour, where we will explore another quadrant of the healthcare galaxy. Until next meeting, thank you very much, Patrick, for being with us today, and I wish you all optimal health.
Thank you so much, Patrick. It was so much fun having you on the show. And of course, to you, Dr. Glenn Woolman, for, again, co-hosting this great production. So much fun. I just love it.
You guys are a blast.
And of course, we would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us in this new platform of education and information. We're always grateful for your continuous support and look forward to hearing your feedback on how we can serve you better. You can contact Dr. Glenn Woolman through his website, glennwoolman.com, where I truly encourage you to learn about his metaphor square breath. And also you can contact Patrick Howell by visiting his blog site, his new blog site. Congratulations, Patrick, on magneticu.com. And of course, you can see that on our site itself. And also, please, we look forward to also having Patrick on some of our other new shows, Empowerment Through Positive Psychology and How to Survive Parenting. So please look forward. We look forward to having him with us and look forward to having you join us. Again, we're always grateful for your feedback. Give us a call at 818-LETS-TALK. 818-LETS-TALK. And we will be sure to pass your comment or suggestions on to our guests. As well, please leave us your contact information and we will keep it confidential and be sure to get right back to you. Until next time, namaste. This week's episode is brought to you by Audible. To browse their catalog of more than 150,000 titles and download the free audiobook of your choice, go to yhtv.us/audible. Sign up or log in with your Amazon account and start enjoying your new book today.
So there are actually two different viruses. They're a little bit similar, but the measles that we're having the outbreak with it's a rubeola virus. And the German measles is a rubella virus. And you've heard the word rubella. Most parents have heard that word when they have to hear about vaccinations for their kids, where they have that vaccination, the MMR vaccinations, which is measles, mumps, and rubella. So they call them the measles that they